While I've dabbled in vegetable gardening my entire adult life, I didn't really get serious about it until 6 years ago or so. And in that short period of time, I've learned a lot about growing vegetables in a small backyard garden and learned a lot of lessons the old fashioned way through failure. So today, I'm going to talk about some of the inconvenient hard truths that I believe most gardeners are probably going to come up against from time to time. And so no one has to sit and watch me talk for the next however many minutes this video is going to be. I'm just going to voice my points over random garden related B roll. That's way more interesting to look at than I am. First up, there's a learning curve to gardening. And fair warning, there's going to be a bit of an old man yells at clouds vibe to this video. I feel like turning 45 this past year has earned me that right. And something I've started to notice in recent years is a weird societal shift where everyone is expected to effortlessly master every new endeavor immediately and with minimal effort. Being bad at a new thing while you learn is apparently seen as cringy in some circles, and I've even seen the phrase try hard used as an insult, though maybe that one's fallen out of favor by now. Who can really keep up? My suspicion is this is one of the many, many detrimental effects of social media. Only successes are shown, and the process is edited and condensed into an easily digestible package that makes everything look effortless. A viewer can end up feeling inadequate and incompetent because they can't master the guitar, ceramics, or tomato cultivation inside an afternoon. And if it doesn't come immediately or naturally, it's simply not worth the effort, apparently. This is a damn shame because trying, failing, and trying again while applying what you've learned through that failure not only leads to mastery of skills, but personal growth as well. A person's first ever vegetable garden is probably going to suck to some degree, and no amount of research or scrolling through social media is going to change that fact. Yeah, good research can improve your chances and give you a good starting point, but there is so much nuance involved in successful gardening and so many factors that can make everything go sideways in a hurry that no amount of preemptive information gathering will guarantee success. There's just no substitute for hands on experience here. Be eager to fail in the garden, but be ready to fail properly so as to avoid repeating your mistakes. When something goes wrong, and it absolutely will, take notes, analyze what went wrong, and research solutions and fixes. An example of mega failure from my own gardening journey came in 2020 after I built several large raised bed gardens in the backyard of the home my wife and I had purchased just the year prior. Flush with pandemic stimulus money, I set about building my beds, which turned out looking a bit wonky on account of being even newer to woodworking than I was to gardening, and then filling them at great cost. I then bought a bunch of various vegetable starts at a local nursery and planted them in the bare soil with visions of a bountiful harvest in my head. That fantasy lasted about 2 months, as by the end of June, my garden was effectively a dust bowl, and all of my plants were sad, stunted, sunburned, and on their last legs. I don't think I even got a handful of tomatoes that year. My two big mistakes were failing to lay down mulch and failing to install shade cloth. As a result, everything was effectively cooked to death by the intense sun of the Sacramento summer. See, prior to that garden in 2020, all of my gardening experience had been in Vermont and Maine, where there are many gardening challenges, but not the absolute murder heat for months on end we get here in Sacramento. So, countermeasures to constant heat and sun just weren't on my radar. I was pretty devastated in the moment after the utter failure of my first garden in Sacramento. Not only had I spent a lot of money on the lumber and soil to build my raised beds, I had poured in a ton of time and labor to build them. I'll admit that part of me was tempted to hang it up after my Dust Bowl year, but I'm really glad I didn't. After a bit of research, I became a devout member of the Church of Mulch and Shade Cloth, and it was an absolute game changer. My garden the following year was orders of magnitude better, and I'm now consistently growing 500 to 600 pounds of fresh produce annually. Up next, social media can't be trusted when it comes to gardening, and I promise this will be my last cranky old man opinion in this video, and I'm aware of the irony and hypocrisy of ranting against social media while also regularly posting videos to a social media platform. That said, there sure is a lot of trash gardening content on social media. The worst offenders seem to be short form content posted to the various platforms, espousing various hacks purported to magically boost harvests while reducing labor to almost nothing. An example that comes to mind is the electroculture thing that had a popularity spike on social media a few years ago. It was the secret that big agriculture didn't want you to know about. Jamming a coil of copper wire into the ground would somehow repel all pests and eliminate the need to fertilize. As though industrial farms wouldn't happily embrace this method if it actually worked. I mean, why wouldn't they? It would save them countless dollars on fertilizers and pesticides annually if a little bit of copper did the trick. Sorry, there is just no substitute for hard work and experience. No little hack or cheat code is going to boost your yields, and at best, you'll find yourself amused by a gimmick. The old cliche, if it's too good to be true, it definitely is probably more true now than ever, especially with the scourge of AI now upon us. And I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone that I am rabidly anti AI and will stand by my assertion that AI is the slow genocide of the working classes. But that's a discussion for another day and a completely different channel. What AI means for the world of online gardening is that someone who has never spent a second of their life with their hands in the soil can now effectively tell a robot to crap out a visually appealing but informationally dubious garden video that could easily steer newbies in the wrong direction. That just doesn't sit well with me. Now, I'm not such a curmudgeonly Luddite that I think social media and the internet are of no value to the gardener. Online gardening communities are typically warm, welcoming spaces that facilitate the sharing of information and the troubleshooting of problems. And there are certainly more than a few garden content creators who really know their shit. I just recommend sticking with content creators who document themselves putting in the work, dealing with the problems and setbacks, and who show the hard and ugly aspects of gardening right alongside the picture perfect cucumber plants and tomato harvests. And even when it comes to reputable online gardeners, their content should be viewed as an orientation or jumping off point for your own gardening endeavors as opposed to gospel, because every garden is its own universe. And I certainly don't mean this in some hippy dippy metaphysical way. What I really just mean is that every individual garden space has its own unique needs and it will offer its own unique challenges. This holds true not only for gardens in vastly different climates, but also for gardens that are right around the corner from each other. Two gardens in the same neighborhood might get different amounts of sunlight at the same time of the year. One lot might get frost earlier or later, and one might be atop a bank of good, fertile, workable soil, while the other is sitting on a giant clay slab. One might be choke slammed by tomato hornworm, while the other is plagued by whitefly. This is why general gardening methods and techniques and all the advice constantly bandied about the internet should be taken as a starting point for your own work, as opposed to hard rules that are chiseled in stone. Over time, every gardener will, through trial and error, have to tweak general methods to suit the unique needs of their own garden. And over time, you'll develop techniques that start churning out a reliable harvest, which leads to my next hard truth. Success is a double edged sword. Now, believe it or not, getting a big harvest out of a garden comes with its own set of challenges, primarily what to do with vegetables you are unable to eat fresh. If you're like me, you absolutely hate the idea of produce you worked oh so hard to grow spoiling because you don't know what to do with a surplus. It just feels awful when that happens. For the last few seasons, I've been growing between 200 and 400 pounds of tomatoes annually from my small backyard plot. From late June into September, almost all of my free time is spent harvesting tomatoes, freezing tomatoes, saucing tomatoes, drying tomatoes, canning tomatoes, etc. It's excruciatingly tedious and gets old fast. But I force myself to power through because to me, the end result is worth enduring it all. Others might not feel the same way. Alternatives to processing and preserving a big harvest could include donating a surplus to food banks or just scaling back the number of plants you grow. Now, if you do decide you want to go down the rabbit hole of processing and preserving your harvest, be aware you're probably going to have to invest in some basic canning equipment and get used to stuff like that because gardening will cost you. It's inevitable that unfortunately, growing your own veggies is going to cost you something. The initial investment is usually the worst part. It's going to be buying lumber and soil if you're going the raised bed route, or you're probably going to have to rent or buy a tiller to establish an in ground garden if you can go that route. After that, there's inevitably going to be annual expenses in the form of fertilizers, amendments, garden tools, etc. Now, it's possible that a gardener could become an ultra frugal buy nothing type and scrounge for free lumber and garden soil, find ways to borrow or steal the tools and equipment they need, and only fertilize with homemade compost and various liquid concoctions made from said compost. Taking the scrounger route will definitely reduce monetary expenses, but there is ultimately no free lunch. It will still cost you, only this time in the form of the extra time and labor it takes to scavenge free materials and then convert them into a workable garden system. Pick your poison there. Of course, no matter how much time, money, and labor you put into your garden, blood, sweat, and tears, your efforts may still all be for nothing because you can do absolutely everything right and still fail. This truth is definitely the hardest of them all to accept. When you get into gardening, you inevitably develop an understanding of how famines occurred so regularly throughout human history, and you develop an appreciation for the fact that we have, at least for now, effectively eliminated them from the developed world. There are just so many factors beyond our control that can completely wipe out a garden. Death can come in the form of a frost that arrives freakishly early, an extreme heat or drought event that burns crops to a crisp, rodent and insect pests, and oh, so many diseases caused by viruses, bacteria, and fungi. You can also do your best to apply preventative measures to keep problems from starting, and then employ various methods to mitigate the damage from problems that do arise, but these are far from a guarantee. At the end of the day, our gardens are at the mercy of nature, and nature is something we just can't control. I wish I had some words of wisdom here that take the sting out of a garden being destroyed by a freak event, but I've honestly got nothing on that one. The only thing I can offer is when the worst happens, don't let it put you off gardening forever. Scream, cry, tantrum, drink, or do whatever you need to get through the moment. But at a certain point, you just have to get back up, collect yourself, and make a plan for a path forward. If a late frost kills the tomatoes you painstakingly started from seed, you might need to resort to buying started plants from a nursery so you can at least get something out of the season. The following year, you might want to start some extra plants and keep them in reserve, well protected until you're a month or better past your last usual frost date. If you end up with a soil-borne disease like I'm dealing with in the form of fusarium wilt, you might end up having to research what plants are resistant to or unaffected by that disease and stick to those varieties for a few seasons. When the worst happens, all you can do is try to learn what you can and press forward. And that's all I've got this time around. If anyone else out there has their own set of hard truths about gardening, I'd love to hear all about them in the comments. And until next time, let's hope it all doesn't die.